Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Behind the Reel. I'm your host, John, and today we've got special guest Mr. Bryan Sowards from the Kansas Department of Wildlife. He is the Fisheries Division Director, and we're going to be talking about all things bass fishing today here in the state of Kansas. So, if you guys have some friends in some local fishing clubs or Facebook groups, make sure you share this video over there with them. I'm sure they'll enjoy it. We're going to get into some topics that some of you guys have shot me some messages about here personally. One of the big ones is the new Alabama rule 5 hook limit. We'll get into that, but that is one I think you guys will be interested in hearing about if you don't know about it already. So do me a favor, guys. If you do have any questions that you want to ask throughout the podcast, put that over in the live comment section over on the right-hand side there. Appreciate you, Organic, already at it, saying what's up. Looking forward to getting this kayak season kicked off and getting the Kansas kayak anglers together here at Big Hill here in just a few weeks. So we just may have to ask some questions in regards to Big Hill so we can just figure out what kind of bite they might be on. But again, if you haven't already, share this with a friend, share it in a group. Let's get some Kansas guys in here tonight. But I'm going to go ahead. We're going to bring Bryan on, and we'll go ahead and get this show started. How's it going?
Hey, good, John. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming along. As I mentioned, you are the Fisheries Division Director. I think I got that right the last time there.
Yep. I actually started in May, so I haven't been on very long. Our last division director was Doug Nygren. A lot of you probably remember him, but he went to a lot of bass business meetings and kind of did a lot for bass fishing in the state. So he was in that position, I think, 25 to 27 years, somewhere in there. So,
Wow.
yeah, been there a
Big
long
shoes to
time.
fill.
Yeah, I think so.
And so you've been with the department for longer than that, though. Is that right?
10 years total. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And where did you start out at with the Department of Wildlife?
Well, I started out here in the Pratt headquarters as a fisheries division coordinator for a lot of the programs that we do, like community fishing access, the urban catfish stocking program, our trout stocking program. A lot of that stuff takes a lot of behind the scenes grant management and stuff like that. So that's how I got my start after I left graduate school. And then I went and I was the fisheries biologist at Wilson and Canopolis for about almost 7 years, and then went to assistant director and director in the last year and a half. So been a lot of movement since then.
Very cool.
Yep.
Heck yeah. So you mentioned this to me before. You are a member of the Hayes Bass Club.
I'm a proud member of the Hayes Bass Club. Yeah, now that we moved to Pratt, it's a drive to go anywhere to do fishing tournaments. But that's about as close as I can get. So, and I like those guys. So I go up and fish those tournaments.
Yeah. We seem to get. It was hard to get people out at Wilson. That's kind of an odd one. I don't know if the kayak guys were just late to the game, but I want to say that Wilson had kind of a slump there maybe for a few years. Do you remember that, or was that just us?
What time frame are you talking about?
Like probably 2016, somewhere around there, and like maybe it started to turn right after that, possibly.
Absolutely. It was in a bad way. It reached its record low in 2016. I think it was somewhere around 11 and a half feet low. And then the rains came that 2016 filled it up, all 11 and a half feet. And then the bass population exploded. So 2017 through now has been the heyday at Wilson for bass fishing. But before that, it was really tough.
Yeah, so that's kind of when I came onto the scene. Kayak fishing on the tournament side of things was fairly new around that time. There was one club up in the Kansas City area, the Northeast Kansas kayak anglers.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't come this way, but we had a tournament, and it took, well, I think I took second with 4 fish, and there was like 20 guys, in the tournament, and a lot of them are, typically turning in some pretty good limits, and then I think the person behind me only had, 2 or 3 fish, and then it was like, 5 places down the line, everybody's getting skunked, so it was like that left a really bad taste in those guys' mouths. So it was hard to get them back out there, but once they started seeing these limits being turned in the last few years, we've had some pretty good attendance. We'll get people clear down southeast Kansas that make the trek.
How many do you do at Wilson in a year?
Just 1, maybe 2. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we are trying to spread them out throughout the state. So we're running. We were running them at a more like local level, but now we've got the Kansas Kayak Anglers where we're kind of running it as one big statewide deal. So we try to kind of spread it out to where everybody's going to do a little bit of traveling, but they'll have a couple events kind of in their backyard, so to speak.
Yeah. I would like to get, we may get into this later, but I would love to be able to get a better handle on tournament fishing. Bass is the big one, but we also have walleye and other things.
Catfish is pretty big.
It's becoming pretty big, yeah, especially in Northeast Kansas. But I would love to get a great handle, but there's so many moving parts, and we you don't have to have a permit. You have to have a state park permit, but not necessarily another one. There's a lot of moving parts there, but it would be really nice to get an idea of pressure based on tournaments and then the traditional pressure too.
Is that something? Is that something that you can track? Is that something that you guys pay attention to as far as like how do you determine, or is that, I guess maybe that's done at more of the local level there at the park office?
Yeah, so that's the way we track it right now. We go based off of park special use permits, and then we can kind of figure out that was a bass tournament or whatever. But right now we don't have a very good way other than that. And we've tried in the past to, get tournament information sent in to us. And I don't know if we paid the Bass Club a certain amount of money every year to be able to do that, but we just never really got good buy-in. So we kind of left it alone, but it'd be cool to approach something like that again, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess before we get into maybe some of these main topics here that we have, I would be curious to know, like, what are some cool opportunities that you've gotten to participate in with your, I guess maybe not necessarily just your current role, but just since you've been with the department. What are some cool things that if somebody might be interested in getting into this line of work, like what are some cool things that they might have to look forward to?
Well, John, I'm glad you backed off of my current role because I stare at computer screens a lot now. But no, I mean, the Wilson job was a dream job for me, and getting, especially growing up bass fishing, getting through that heyday of the bass population really booming and getting your hands on a lot of fish. We did a lot of genetic evaluation of fish. So that's really the sciencey part of the job. You get your hands on fish as often as you can, which is enough motivation for most people to pursue a job like this. But then there's the sciencey part of it, where you're doing genetic evaluations. You're looking at stuff in a microscope. You're aging fish based on the hard structures, an otolith or an earstone. We're aging fish to get an idea of how old, the population or how fast they're growing. Those are the kinds of things that really interested me when I was first getting on. We're going to start looking at genetic evaluation of our walleye populations as well. So there's a lot of different things in there.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Do you have one of the, I know you've got kind of a list of topics that we're going to be discussing here tonight. Do you have one that sticks out at you, one over the other? One that you're maybe more excited about?
Well, kind of excited about all of it. I know we probably won't be able to touch on it much, but you did mention your listeners were very interested in the Alabama rig conversation. So
Yeah,
if
I
you
think
want, we can start there.
yeah, yeah. So for those of you guys that don't know, some of those rules have changed. I would be curious to know, maybe you can just tell us exactly what these rules mean for us, what kind of tackle we can use, but then what went on with that decision-making process. And
Well, anytime we make a decision at that level, we like to consult staff and make sure that there's no biological impact perceived from this, or at least beyond something that we can palate, a palatable solution. So there wasn't any real concerns, but what happened was, and I would encourage you all to do this if you ever have an issue or you want something done in a particular way or you just want to voice your opinion, to go to our commission meetings, because that's essentially what happened here. Enough anglers, and I believe they were in Northeast Kansas. I don't know who exactly it was, but they had approached us 3, 4, 5 years in a row, and they approached the commissioners about allowing it. And finally, we took it seriously, and ended up just this last year allowing it. So that's just kind of a plug for if you guys ever have anything you want to bring up other than just contacting us or contacting our offices. A commission meeting is a great way to do that.
yeah, very cool. So that actually got you guys to bring it to the table, put it up to like a vote, and
Yep, it was unanimous.
okay. And so we were 2 hooks before,
Mm-hmm.
and now we can use up to 5.
Right. Right. So what we did basically, we didn't. I know you said a lot of people have had trouble finding this because the way we went about it wasn't just the Alabama rig is legal now, or the umbrella rig is legal now. What we did was we just changed the definition of a lure, and then we had to change some other things in our regulation that are tied to that. And so before, it was a lure can not have more than, I think it was 2 hooks, but whatever it was, we essentially said that if a lure mimics multiple prey items, then it can have up to 5 hooks.
Okay.
And that's not to say like you have what's that brand that has a bunch of shad printed on
Live
it?
target.
It's not like that. It's if it physically mimics multiple prey items, that it can have up to 5 hooks. But then if you have 2 lures per line, they can't have more than 6 hooks. So basically, we just changed some language, did some little black magic there, and came up with a solution. But ultimately, that solution led to the Alabama rig being a legal means of fishing.
Why do you think your staff was unanimous? Like, why do you think they wanted to see that?
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm saying our commissioners.
Okay. Okay.
Because when the public, um, when we get it to the commissioners for a vote, they're of the understanding that at that point our staff agrees and the public agrees, whether or not that's the case. And they listen to the public come in, and we workshopped it for months, and nobody came in and voiced opposition to it. So they had no problems with it. We did have some staff that had some issues with snagging white bass and things like that. But the reality is we have regulations in place that if you do snag a white bass or any other species, you let it go. So we already have some regulation and some language to protect for things like that. So we felt that given the circumstances that it probably wouldn't be a very negative impact on anything.
Okay. And so I guess I wasn't. I guess I'm fairly new to the fishing world, and as it relates to the Alabama rig or the umbrella rig, whatever we want to call it. So that was just always, that the Alabama rig always was, as far as I'm concerned. I basically started fishing in like 2015, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was always a no go. So I never even messed with it. But like why did it become so demonized? Like, especially at the state level, the Department of Wildlife gets involved at that point. I kind of understand it from a tournament perspective. I'm assuming you weren't around for that either, but
Oh no, this is another topic that I'm sure we're going to get to, but it's technology, right? It's scary.
yeah,
Anytime you come up with something, even my staff and other people are like, oh man, that's going to give people an unfair advantage. What are we going to do about that? Whether you're talking about the umbrella rig, or I remember back in my day, it was like, I don't know if it was that big a deal, but the banjo minnow,
yeah,
that wasn't that great of a lure, but they were, anytime something comes out, that's kind of how it's treated. And that's the take that we took on it at the time. And even BASS at the time was not advocating for it, at least in their series. So
yeah. I
we
think
just kind of,
they still can't use it, I believe.
yeah, I was told that they were reevaluating that in the near term, but I don't really know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like forward facing sonar and all that stuff that comes out, there's a knee jerk reaction to it. But the thing about the Alabama rig is we already, like I said, the definitions were already in place to not allow it.
Yeah.
So the easiest thing to do was say, no, let's not go there. But there's nothing in there about forward facing sonar or anything like that. So those things are just running through,
Sure.
right or wrong, but yeah.
Kind of unchecked almost.
Yeah.
Should we jump into that then? Like, I mean,
I think that's natural.
Yeah, that kind of ties in. How is forward facing sonar different from the Alabama rig in your opinion? Or and then also maybe how are they similar?
Well, they go hand in hand really well. I've used the forward facing sonar. I don't chuck an Alabama rig. It just doesn't appeal to me. But they go hand in hand because they can be very very productive. The forward facing sonar way more so. Crappie anglers across the state. I was just talking to a buddy of mine that is at Coffee County Lake, Wolf Creek, and he goes out to Melbourne the last 3 or 4 winters, and just the other day there was 100 boats out there in the dead of winter. Of course, it was a nice day, and you guys may know this if you guys go crappie fishing too, but that wasn't a thing 4 years ago.
Yeah,
you didn't see 100 people out in January, February targeting crappie, and so it's changed the game. It's huge. Now, if we want to talk about how it potentially affects the population, we could go there, but it's just changed the game in terms of people being active during the winter and other times of the year catching fish. So it's kind of been a good thing. It's not just that. I wouldn't say that I'm that worried about how it impacts our populations. I think it's been a pretty good thing for anglers, kind of a confidence builder.
How much would, like, I guess, at what point would it affect fish population? I mean,
well, the beauty of it is that we already have systems in place and biologists in place who are monitoring these populations.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can pick up on some of those changes from year to year. So we're doing a pretty good job of looking at that. And we just finished it. I know we're wanting to talk about bass, but we just finished a big age and growth study across the state on our crappie populations. And we're finding, and this is something that we figured, we just didn't know it could be done, that the more crappie you harvest, in a lot of instances, the better off those populations are until you get to a certain point. Because you start thinning out the crappie, they start growing faster, and they reproduce very quickly. So it's of little concern in those populations until somebody brought up like Glen Elder. I don't know, that must be 10, 15 years ago now, where folks from Nebraska and everybody else flocked to ice fish for crappie on Glen Elder. And it did have a negative impact. So you can reach a threshold, whether you're using forward-facing sonar or even a traditional technique, you can get to a point where you might do that. But we are monitoring the population, and we have the tools to change regulations if we need to.
Okay. Sorry, I had to mute my mic here. My dog's out in the backyard barking at something, so hopefully you guys didn't have to hear that too much. Um, so you don't think the forward-facing sonar, at least at this point, is making a negative impact on what we got going on here? What I guess are you doing right now? Maybe what are some efforts you guys have going on at the moment, or that you've maybe recently wrapped up in order to help out some of the populations, whether that's habitat or I don't even really know what all goes into that. So if you want to just maybe kind of let us know what are some of the things that you guys do in order to help out these bodies of water.
Yeah, I mean, habitat's a big one. That takes a lot of effort on our employees and partners and volunteers. Even I know the Hayes Bass Club, they go out once or twice a year and help a local biologist install habitat, usually cedar trees, something like that. Um, so that's kind of a smaller scale shotgun approach. We also do, complete renovations every now and then. Those are fairly expensive, but we'll add rotenone to a lake, completely kill out all the fish, and restart. Usually, that's when you have a nuisance species like common carp, really bad stunted crappie population, just a situation where you want to start over. And that's the most effective way to do it. But like I said, you end up paying for it, and it takes time to rebuild those populations. But um, we are looking at doing more of those in the future. We've set aside more of our budget to take on larger scale renovations in our state fishing lakes. There's very little we can do in our Bureau of Reclamation and Army Corps of Engineer federal reservoirs, like
Yeah.
like Big Hill, Wilson, Cedar Bluff, Melbourne, all those. There's very little we could do at that scale. So we're focusing on the state-owned state fishing lakes. Um,
Do you know uh, what the deal is with Kingman?
yeah, that's one where common carp got back in there just a couple years after they renovated it the last time, which was
Yeah.
somewhere around 11 or 12. And common carp got in there just uh, really, really reproduced rapidly. And you remember all the lotus in the lake, the
Yeah.
pads, they just root around in the sediment and they keep stuff like that from establishing.
Hmm.
They just keep that silt mixed into the water, so you got less water clarity, and it's an ecological kind of nightmare when you get carp to that density. So they're going to renovate it again, and hopefully this time we can get it right.
Yeah, because it was doing really good, at least from our observation, probably in that 16, 17, maybe 18, 2018. Um, but we were seeing some really good results when we'd go out there and have a little kayak tournament.
Mm-hmm.
You were starting to see that. I mean, you were catching tons of 2 and 3 pound largemouth, and you'd see some fours and fives. But yeah, those lily pads and stuff disappeared, and yeah, I definitely noticed that. But that'll be a good one to get back. We used to like to go out there and hook into some northern pike every now and then.
Yeah, I think the plan is to put northern pike back in there.
Really?
We usually get those from Nebraska. We don't have a hatchery, broodstock, or anything like that, but we'll trade with other states to get some of the things we want. But that's the other thing that we do is we're always doing different things at our four fish hatcheries to grow this fish and how can we do it better. So that's another thing that we're always doing to make things better in our populations. One thing this is be of good note is do a lot of your listeners know the early spawn bass program that we started about 2010
I
2012?
don't know. I don't know about it. I don't think.
Well, it's I guess state of the art. It's a building out at Mead Fish Hatchery. It's quite nice if you want to get a tour sometime down in the arid southwest part of the state. But so we modeled it. This was kind of a big Doug Nygren idea. They modeled it and others as well. After Florida, they started to basically move broodstock in earlier than they normally would spawn. And so we're moving them in and we're kind of messing with the ambient conditions, the lighting, the water temperature, and we're getting them to spawn 4 to 6 weeks earlier than they would in the wild. So that early April time frame, as opposed to early May, I think actually late March, early April, we'll get them to spawn already.
Nice.
And so then we can grow them up and get them back in the lakes at a larger size earlier than they normally would. So it's given us some really good growth advantages, and it worked really well at Wilson. That population, I like to contribute a lot of that because we stocked a lot of those fish in 2016 when Wilson was filling up. And it was just perfect timing that I requested all these bass, and the lake just started to come up and flooded all that Phragmites reed grass and all the trees that had come up, and it was just like a perfect storm. And those fish grew faster than most bass grow in Kansas. They were growing 10, 11 inches in their first year, which is that's super fast, especially for a reservoir. So it can work in those stock on the rise situations. We've been doing a lot of it at Hillsdale and other lakes that stay stable most of the year, or even lakes where they're declining, and they just don't do as well. They show up for a couple of years, maybe 3 years, and then just disappear. And I don't know why. But they do really well when you stock a reservoir on the rise after it's been low for a while. So we've changed our stocking program. Instead of, this biologist over here and this biologist over here request a bunch of largemouth, we just set it up so we're growing 250,000 largemouth every year, and we wait until they're ready in June, and we start calling around, hey, who's got the right conditions, who's got a favorable environment for these 250,000 fish, and we're going to divvy them up that way. So I think that's going to be a real game changer in terms of getting the bass where they need to be when they need to be there. So I'm kind of excited about that recent change.
That's cool. Heck yeah. You mentioned Hillsdale. Do you know much about that lake? Like, it kind of gets a rap for being a tough lake.
Yeah, I know very little about Hillsdale.
Okay.
I know that 2019 came through, and whatever water willow vegetation they used to have, I think on the upper end, I'm not sure, that kind of decimated that aquatic vegetation. So he's been working at reestablishing that, but I just know that the sampling information that we get back on largemouth is kind of average to subpar as well. So I'm not surprised that maybe it's a little tougher.
Yeah, and I think I've heard something recently about maybe trying to get some more aquatic vegetation back into Wilson. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I think it's probably some of the same things, transplant and water willow. That's like the hardiest. It's the best thing you can do for bass in this part of the world because it's hardy. Mm-hmm. They're doing some other stuff like eelgrass and things in South Carolina and doing fairly well. But when you have lakes that fluctuate up and down with our weather and everything, it makes it challenging. So water willow is something that we do fairly often. And I think they're trying that at Wilson.
Nice. Okay. I guess if you were to maybe build, the perfect lake for Kansas, like, what would that look like? Maybe what kind of features would it have? And then maybe what is the closest thing that we have to that?
Well, I think it's bass anglers. You might have something in your head, and that's, to be honest, from the role I'm in, I still see it as a bass angler, right? That you want a lot of shallow habitat for good spawning access and warm, productive cover in the spring and summer, and you want a lot of diversity in your bathymetry or your topography within the remainder of the lake. You want deep access, you want mid-level access. You don't want something that is just uniform.
Yeah.
A bowl, right? And you want good, diverse habitat. It's not just about having a bunch of trees. It's not just about having a bunch of rock like Melvern. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you guys fish with Melvern. I never really have, but I got a buddy that fishes there. And yeah, it's just all rock. But so it's about diversity, right? And having a lot of different things that they can have access to.
Sure. What do the stats say the best lake in Kansas is? What is on paper? What is the best bass lake for, and then maybe even we'll have some crappie guys and stuff, like what are maybe some of the other species too? Like, are they one and the same? I would be curious to know.
Well, I guess it depends on what you're looking for bass, because I think, we offer a number of different things. It's not like we offer it. I think the population's just balanced in a certain way, but to me, it's Norton or Sibelius Reservoir.
Really?
Unfortunately, it's been real droughty up there this past year, and it's just continuing to go down, continuing to drop. But every year for the last 10 years, the catch rates have been higher than about anywhere else in terms of a reservoir. And it's more like a large pond, but um, I think it is 1,500 acres, something like that. The catch rates that we see during our electrofishing sample is always through the roof. My dad lives in Norton, so I get to fish there every now and then. And it's really high catch rates. The size is just now started to come on right when the lake starts to drop, but the size really started to come on. Actually won one of the Hayes Bass Club tournaments 2 years ago. I think we're 4.5 pounder. So they're getting up there in the 5.5 pound size range.
Nice.
I don't win a lot, by the way. I won that one.
Heck yeah.
But anyway, that's probably my favorite in terms of just having a good day of catching numbers, but still having that opportunity. But we have a lot of state fishing lakes that do a little bit better, especially those in smaller watersheds. Butler State Fishing Lake consistently shows up at the top of our fishing forecast.
Yeah.
McPherson State Lake, it's only like 43 acres. That's a pretty good one. It's hard to catch them though. They're at Butler and McPherson because they're usually pretty fat and happy.
Okay. And so what are they feeding on? Do you know, in those particular bodies of water? Is it just going to be
Well,
shad?
it's a lot of bluegill, but
Yeah.
a lot of big shad. So I don't know. Big shad get a bad rap because they're fairly useless for most predators. They're just taking up space, taking up plankton, rooting around in sediment. A lot of the bigger gizzard shad, they'll just be filled with all that nasty sediment. How they process all that is interesting. Um, but if you can get those big bass to those big gate levels, and you got big shad, that's a perfect recipe. So usually you don't like them, but if you can get big bass, the big shad really pay off.
Okay. Scott's saying, "Where's Butler?" He knows where it's at. I won't put him on blast, but I got some Tourney X pictures. I could remind him where Butler's at.
You guys fish Butler?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, so not as a club. Now we did. I really haven't been running the Air Capital kayak anglers, just kind of the local thing. We kind of just branched out and done the more statewide deal, but we would have, we've had 30 guys out there. I mean, and it's pretty, that's, it's pretty full when you get that many kayaks out there, but definitely it's not, big enough to house, our bigger group, but yeah, we'll do some like online tournaments and stuff as well, like monthly online tournaments where you submit your fish via like your phone app and put them on a measuring board, just like we do in our regular tournaments, but you can catch them all month long, and whoever gets the best 5 fish limit wins, type of deal.
Wherever you want.
Yeah, wherever you want, public water. And then so you have to have like your GPS turned on your phone. So, when you submit your pictures, I get all your fishing spots. So that's the cool thing about it, is that I'm the judge. I get everybody's, secret honey holes. But
Right.
but anyways, so yeah. But yeah, I didn't make it out to I made it out to Butler like once or twice last year. I think both times I caught, I didn't catch very many fish, but I caught a couple good ones. And whenever we would go out there and have a tournament, it would always be a really good, it would always be a good like top 5 guys would do really well. It wouldn't always trickle down as much as you would see in some of the bigger bodies of water, but lots of good fish in there for sure. Like tons of 3-pounders in there, and sometimes the bigger ones would come out and play. But yeah, we probably need to do a little spring get together out there and see if we can catch a few out there, because there are definitely some good ones in there. What'd you say the other one was? The other
Well,
little one?
McPherson State Lake, about 42, 43 acres.
Yeah.
Yeah, east of McPherson.
We went out there once. I think we had a tournament out there early on, and maybe we had 2 of them. I think one of them was really tough, and then the other one I think we did all right at. But
I think you mentioned Cowley earlier to me,
yeah,
maybe before we were on air, but
mm-hmm.
Cowley came in as our number two
Really?
lake. When we do the forecast, we break out reservoirs from the other lakes because it's kind of not apples to apples. But Cowley came in second, right behind Butler.
I got a tournament win out there, so we can talk about that one. But yeah, that I like Cowley. It's got a ton of grass. That's kind of what I like about it. It's a little bit different than what you see in a lot of the bigger reservoirs. Not seeing a lot of grass unless you go to what I think. I'll think of Cowley. I'll think of Big Hill. I don't know. Wilson, I guess.
Yeah.
Got a little bit, but that's one cool thing I like about it, and you got a lot of rock out there too, and so a little bit clearer water. We don't have a whole lot of that around here.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And that's what guys like about Wilson.
Yeah. Well, it sure is. It's pretty, right? But
yeah,
my fishing style is more like chocolate milk, so Wilson's tough at times, but it taught me to fish in a different way, so that was good.
Yeah, I definitely have become comfortable in the chocolate milk stuff, and the clear water is a little bit intimidating when you can see 5 or 6 feet down below your kayak, and you're like, oh man.
Right.
Let's see.
Scott wanted to talk about share lunker in Kansas.
Yeah, I kind of skipped over that, but yeah, you wanna give your take on that?
Yeah, sure. You talk about obstacles. We're currently building a state-of-the-art facility out at Mead, right next door to our early spawn building.
Mm-hmm.
And the price tag on that keeps going up. The hurdles that we're dealing with keep going up, and that's been like a huge burden on me and my staff. So building anything right now, especially post-COVID, has been it's not fun. But we do have a facility there. If we wanted to do something like this share lunker, we could. Of course, it's all relative, right? So a 13-pound lunker in Texas, that may only be a 6 or 7 pounder in Kansas, and then you artificially select from there. The only issue I have so far is I haven't seen a lot of research come out about the Texas share lunker and its actual in the water improvements on populations. There's been speculation, and it's a great facility to go learn and see really cool stuff. Texas Parks and Wildlife does a really good job of that and selling their stuff, but I just haven't seen a lot of benefits from it yet, other than the outreach and everything. But it's definitely something that we're not taking off the table if we do see that there's a benefit to that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess I have I would assume that you could improve the genetics. I guess that's the aim, is to just improve the overall genetics in a given body of water, and then take that maybe and expand it. But They definitely have big bass there, but I don't know. Are they catching those, yet? And they're probably not because it's a fairly new program, isn't it? Or
Well, it's been around at least a decade.
okay,
Um, the thing about fish genetics is it's so interesting because those 13-pound fish may live. Oh, I'm guessing that's at least, even if it's growing fast, a 12 to 16-year-old fish, maybe older. It's rare for a fish to get past all the gauntlets in its life to get to that size. So it's not just a genetic hurdle that they're getting through. They're getting through all the other natural abiotic and biotic hurdles too. So
mm-hmm.
even if you get the genetics right, that doesn't mean
It's
that they're
going to
going to get to
survive.
the larger size. So,
Okay. Oh, here's a good one. Where do you see the next Kansas State record coming from?
well, our current state record came from what, a private pit down in the Mine Lands area. So,
Yeah.
um, you didn't say largemouth. So I've always been, this last few years, people, when I was at Wilson, people would come at me in April. It was always April. They were catching these big smallmouth. And I was just waiting for it to happen, waiting for it to happen. They brought in some fives, maybe a 5.5, and it just never happened. I still think for smallmouth that Wilson has all the ingredients to get there. Largemouth, though, I don't want to be pessimistic. Maybe, Cedar Bluff, 16-foot low, and it's grown up a lot of vegetation and woody structure. And if it does fill up in the next, uh, whenever it fills up, it could have potential to do that. But other than that, probably a large private lake somewhere in Kansas. There's a few of them.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of these guys mind hearing that they're coming from a strip pit, at least if it's a public one, because we like to go fish down there as well. We'll host a tournament down there where you can fish whatever pitch you want to fish.
Hey, that's
So
cool. I like that.
yeah,
That can be overwhelming.
yeah, oh yeah. There's so many options, but the nice thing is I think I guess the last 2 years, I don't think I had anybody else on my pit the whole day.
Oh,
And I even moved throughout the day. So I mean, there's just so many. There's just so many of them.
yeah.
He was hoping you'd say Big Hill for the next smallmouth. Does Big Hill have a lot of big smallmouth?
Well, it's getting better. It's seemingly. Maybe I don't fish it. Maybe you guys would know. What's the biggest smallmouth you've seen out of there?
I don't know. The biggest one I've caught out of there is probably about this big.
Well, in our sampling, there was a 3.8, 3.8
There you
caught,
go.
but I'm sure that's just a small sample. I'm sure they get bigger than that.
What so what is the smallmouth um, state record? Is it around 6 pounds?
6'10", 6'11"
Oh wow,
ounces, something like that.
it's up there, almost 7 pounder.
I think that's what it is. Yeah, give or take.
Hi Brooks. Okay, let's see. How can anglers get involved if they wanna maybe improve habitats at their local lakes, or want to get involved at any capacity? How can they do that? Maybe what are some of the things that they can do?
Sure. Um, we, a lot of bass groups and even recently our Kansas Walleye Association has been working with us to improve habitat. Usually that's in the form of sinking trees, making anchors to sink trees, putting in synthetic habitat. Whereas that one, we're getting in more pressure every year with all the plastic in our public waterways.
Yeah.
Um, we, it's not that we've been lambasted, but the pressure continues to mount. People writing papers calling out folks for installing synthetic habitat.
Hmm.
But anyway, we're still doing some of that. A lot of trees, a lot of cedar trees. Um, so basically, what I really like that we just did a change on is we promoted a regional biologist for habitat in each of the regions. So we have your western region, That guy's Mark Shaw. He's out of Webster office. Northeast Kansas is Nick Kramer out of our Perry office. And Southeast Kansas, our habitat coordinator is Craig Johnson. And you know Craig out of the El Dorado office. So if you
Yeah.
get those guys, and it's their first name dot last name at ks.gov, but I can give you that information if you need it. You start there. I think that's the best place to start, to volunteer, to get involved, to direct projects maybe the way that you want them to, eh, within reason. But that's a really good place to start.
Cool. Heck yeah.
And then we also have community lakes like our CFAP lakes, Community Fishing Assistance Program. They have a lot of good lakes like Gridley City Lake and just a lot like that. Alma City Lake is kind of out there, but it's near the top of our list for bass samples last year. And so just getting with the community too, they might send you on to our biologist, but you can get with the community and see if they need help, trash pickup, habitat work, whatever.
Sure. Heck yeah. Yeah, we might need to do some of that out at El Dorado this year. See if they need some help picking up or sinking trees.
Yeah,
I like the idea of knowing where some of those brush piles are.
yeah.
And there is a way to do that as well, online. So you can go on your guys' website, and is that brush piles that they're marking there? I guess they do, like the cubes and the brush piles all listed on the website, don't they?
Yeah, and they don't all have IDs to them. Some you can click on it; it'll tell you it's like you said, it's 3 cubes right here, or we put a brush pile here, a brush pile there. We put 6 cubes over here. Some of them don't go to that level of detail, and even the year they were put in, but it will give you kind of more information on what's there.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah. So if you guys are looking to locate some brush piles for some of these tournaments coming up, you can go on to the KS Outdoors. Is it .com?
yeah.
KS,
KSL.com.
and I'm not sure. I haven't dug into it too much. I'm not sure if you get like a waypoint out of it, or how
Um,
that's something you can just
well,
type into your graph.
it used to just be a Google Earth KMZ file, but I think we've changed that. Um, but anyway, just Google on there, and you can find. I think there's 2 or 3 different ways you can look at them, and they'll
Sure.
give you a GPS point.
Now, one other thing that I had on here, the walk-in fishing program. What I guess maybe what is that all about, and what goes into, like, do you guys do any sort of stocking or anything in those bodies of water?
Yeah, um, guys get spread thin once you get a whole lot of different programs, and but the walk-in fishing is a really interesting one. We don't do a lot with them. Some of them we do. They're little, diamonds in the rough. I remember it actually my the guy who followed me at Wilson just sampled it, and it's on the fishing forecast. It's called the Lang Pond in Lincoln County, kind of the middle of nowhere. Well, it is the middle of nowhere, but there wasn't a lot of bass, but every one that was popping up was 3 to 5 pounds,
Wow.
and only like 18 inches. They're just toads, toads. It's just a whole different system. Not a whole lot of pressure, not a whole lot of people putting stuff there. So it kind of, I don't know. There's a lot of gyms like that out there.
Yeah.
If you find one that works for you, I know a lot of people in our department that they won't go fishing at our reservoirs or whatever, but because they like to fish some of the walk-in fishing access ponds. A lot of that is because some of them don't get a lot of pressure. You can,
Yeah.
you kind of have some of them to yourself.
Yeah, like especially for guys who have become, quote unquote tournament anglers, so if you're fishing a tournament series, then a lot of your spare time, a lot of the spare time you have is going to be dedicated to fishing places you're going to fish later on in the year, so if you're not a tournament guy, then that's probably a good thing to check out. Or if you just have a spare, some spare time to go check those places out. Um, I've been thinking about maybe trying to do that. So you're saying the Lang Pond? That's one I should check out.
You got to walk quite a ways. So
But they're all over. How do you know like how many you have, or is there like hundreds of them, or
no, I mean I should know that, but I don't know about hundreds. I'd be comfortable saying somewhere between 100 and 150, but don't quote me
yeah,
on that. Obviously, more in eastern Kansas than there is in western Kansas, just because of the availability of water. But there's a lot in the Manhattan area.
really?
Our biologist up there got after it. He enrolled a lot of ponds up there. There's a few in the Perry area, southeast Kansas.
Are they like? How do you come to acquire those? Like, are some of them also a part of like walk-in hunting?
A lot of times that's how we'll acquire some of these. Other ones we physically go out and look and say, hey, that's a really nice pond. I wonder if they're interested. Oftentimes they're not. If it's that good, oftentimes we don't offer that much money for them. It's like,
Get the hell out of here.
yeah, we offer like $100 an acre. So if it's like a 20-acre pond, that's only $2,000 a year. Maybe that's worth it for them. Maybe it's not.
Yeah.
So yeah, some of them will identify and approach the landowner. Other ones they're approaching us because they're already in the walk-in hunting program.
Okay. Cool. I don't know that I've ever been to one of those, so that's something I may have to check off the list this year. What do you guys have anything new coming up for 2023? I know we talked about the Alabama rig stuff. That's new. That was the new thing for the year, right off the bat. But do you have any like events or new programs or anything that you can talk about?
Man, John, we're always tweaking something. Especially with me being new in my role, we're looking at a lot of different things. Maybe not so much just focused on bass, but a lot of different
Sure.
things. I told you we recently changed our program and how we're going to stock bass. We're going to wait for the conditions to get right, put them in the best place for success. An interesting thing we're doing with walleye is we're genetically marking them like we have done with our largemouth bass. So we genetically identify the parents and then we track their offspring. So then when we go to stock and then we go to sample those fish, we can take genetic fin clips from them and tell, hey, did they spawn in the wild or were they from the hatchery? And so we've been given great information on a largemouth program because we've put in the effort to get that genetic information. We've been banging our heads against the wall for decades trying to figure out why walleye aren't doing well or are doing well. Is our stocking even working? Other states all over, we've been doing it. And so now we're finally going to put some genetics to it. And I think we're going to get really good information on how well our programs are doing for walleye because we're growing them to a lot different sizes now. We're doing, the typical fry fingerlings, but now we're growing them up to 10 inches. Which one works the best? We don't know. So hopefully we'll get more information on that.
And is Kansas speak like is that kind of like as far as a walleye's natural environment, are we just kind of right outside of what that typically looks like for them? Are they just a little bit harder to grow here because we're just a little too far south? Or
Yeah, I think the range of a walleye was like the northeast tip of the state. I think
yeah,
probably because of the Missouri River, but we're not really in the range of the walleye. And with climate change and stuff going on, it, and our reservoirs are aging, they're filling in with sediment, blue green algae, warmer water. Those things are really going to be tough on a cool water fish like walleye. So we're trying to figure out the best way to do it. And one of those is we create the sawguy, which is a hybrid between the sauger
yeah,
male and walleye females. Those just do better in our situation. So we're focusing on sawguy quite a bit, and we've started focusing a lot on blue catfish because
Hmm.
just doing really well on their own. They don't take a lot of work once you get them established. So yeah,
Nice.
as for
What?
they take a lot of work to turn the tide and get things going, to develop habitat, to get vegetation growing. So sometimes in western Kansas, when you have a drought situation, which is one thing I wanted to mention, Melbourne, Big Hill, Clinton, all those lakes that you mentioned um, at some point are 2.5 to 3 foot low right now. A lot of that seems like a bad thing, but I see that as an opportunity. If they can stay low a little bit, grow some vegetation, fill back up, those are great opportunities to develop a good year class of largemouth bass.
Yeah. 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 Because you kind of attributed Wilson's comeback to that kind of specific
Yeah, and that was
event.
that was on a big scale. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't know if your listeners will remember what happened at Cedar Bluff after the '93 flood, but it really came on in the late '90s, and it was, Jimmy Houston was out there, everybody was out there catching
Really.
catching 30, 35 pound bags there for a few years. I mean, it was special, but it had been reduced like 50 feet and
Wow.
filled up. So I mean, that was a really big example of what can happen when you get the right conditions.
Hmm. And is that one still? Is it doing good? Is it? Do you know kind of where it's at?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great place to go to catch a lot of fish right now because it gained a lot of water back in 2019, 2018, 19.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. 2019. Yeah. Something like that.
it gained a lot of water then, and we stocked some of our early spawn bass, and they did really well on their own too because it flooded a lot of habitat. And our Hayes group goes out there all the time, and it's a good time.
Nice. Yeah. It looks like Derek here. He says he's caught some giants from walk-ins. Spent a few years exploring. I'm gonna have to do some of that. I think that'd be cool just to kind of get a list of them, go check them out, make a little weekend out of
Yeah.
making your rounds.
Robert asked the best flathead lake.
Yep,
I assume he interested in catching some big flathead.
I would think so.
Thing. Surprisingly, Wilson is rising
Really?
to the top, and I'm not sure why.
Wow.
Done some habitat improvements. The lake filled up in 16. They usually take 5, 6, 7 years to start growing to those larger sizes. Maybe that's why they're showing up. So Wilson's close to the top of the list, but I saw that the other day. For whatever,
Anybody have any guesses? Best flathead lake?
oh, here it is. Any guesses on there?
I have no idea. I bet we got some guys in the crowd that like to target them. I've seen some guys catching them out of the kayaks before. It seems like a pretty fun ride.
Well, this is just from our data. I don't know if anybody's going to guess, but we haven't sampled flathead. We haven't actually went out to target them very often, except for some state fishing lakes recently.
Hmm.
And then so this is a little biased. Milford is a guess.
Yeah.
Milford didn't make the list. Kansas River is a good one. Yeah, Lovewell actually is the top of our list,
Hmm.
and so if you go find the brush piles on Lovewell, we're pulling out 50, 60 pounders out of there.
Nice.
We pulled a 60 pounder out of Canopolis a few years ago. Of course,
Danny says Perry.
Perry. I think Perry's pretty good. It didn't make the list, but Glen Elder's number two.
Okay.
Sibelius, Webster. What is this with northwest
Like
Kansas? I don't
like
know.
clear water lakes. Is it like aren't those all a little bit clear?
Except for Lovewell, and Lovewell's not clear. It's a catfish lake.
Yeah. Yeah. You usually don't associate big flathead with clear water reservoirs.
Yeah, some of those have good bluegill populations, though.
Sure.
Definitely Sibelius does.
Cool. Well, I did just get a low battery alert from my computer here, and I forgot to bring my charger out here. So before we get cut short, I just figure I would. I think we covered just about everything on my list. Was there anything that you wanted to maybe end with, or anything that maybe we didn't get a touch on that you wanted to talk about real briefly?
Well, one of the last things I had was walk-in fishing, so I'm really glad you guys pulled that one out.
Nice.
I don't think we have enough time to talk about forward-facing sonar.
Okay, yeah. I guess we didn't really get into that much.
Oh, here's a good one though that I can do pretty
Okay.
quick. The
Yeah.
Florida bass, and
Oh, yeah.
maybe that's what you were looking at for the share lunker program,
Hmm.
because obviously those fish have a lot of Florida bass genetics in them. But we are thinking about doing some Florida bass introductions, at least some of the alleles or some of the genetics in the Bone Creek population and Meridocene. We
Nice.
did try this in the 1970s in kind of a wider swath throughout the state. It just did not work very well back then. The Florida strain, the climate has changed a little bit since the 1970s. Things are getting warmer, but I don't know how much. So we're thinking maybe it would work better for Florida's now. But back then, the issue was the northern strain, or just the largemouth bass, did so much better in Kansas and grew faster. The Florida bass just couldn't handle it. They survived, but they would not grow. And that's what that early research told us. So we've kind of moved on. We moved on from it, but we're kind of rethinking about maybe trying at Bone Creek and Meridocene.
And any reason in particular those places?
Good bass habitat, and they're just a little on the warmer side of things.
Sure.
So traditionally pretty good for bass, and
Yep.
then um, also just in a warmer part of the state.
And I'll let you answer this one. When does the A-rig thing take effect?
Oh, that's done. January, 2 months ago.
January 1st, 2023. So if you've been fishing 5 hooks on your Alabama rig all year, you're in the clear.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, hey, Bryan, I really do appreciate you coming on, and maybe we'll have you on in the future. It was informative to kind of have you on here and hear about some of the stuff that you guys are doing. And we definitely appreciate the efforts. And if there's something that we can do, we kind of know how to make that happen now. So if any of you anglers are interested in getting involved and helping out with habitat and things like that, then we can definitely get involved here. So, yeah, anything that you want to mention before we sign off here tonight?
Just if you have trouble getting a hold of somebody or whatever, just call anyone at the Pratt office or anywhere else, and we'll steer you in the right direction and get you who you need to be with.
All right. Thank you. And you have yourself a good one, and hopefully we'll be seeing you out on the water here before too long.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
All right. See you, man. All right, guys, there you go. That is tonight's episode. Mr. Bryan Sowards of the Kansas Department of Wildlife. He is the Fisheries Division Director. I'll try not to make this outro too long-winded. I do have a low battery here, but it was awesome to have him on. I got in touch with the Department of Wildlife and told them I would be interested in having somebody on the podcast, and they kind of got with him because he's in charge of the Fisheries Division, and they were trying to figure out who would be a good fit, and he said that he would like to do it. So it's pretty cool to see somebody that is in, that position, that has a passion, and obviously to get to that level, you have to be fairly passionate about what you're doing. But he's a member of the Hayes Bass Club, an avid fisherman. He came and talked to us at the Kansas Bass Nation Fall Banquet. And that's where I found out about the new Alabama rig regulations. And so kind of cool just to hear some of the behind the scenes stuff. And we may be able to have them on again in the future and talk about some different things that they have going on. But cool to hear about some of the stuff that they're doing with like the Florida strain, largemouth, and interested to see what kind of effects that'll have on, those fisheries. Bone Creek will be down there for the Kansas Bass Nation Kayak Series this year. So if you guys want to check that out, maybe get some intel for when those Florida strains take over. And then also like the early stocking program, that's kind of a cool deal as well. And it sounds like it's been very beneficial in the past. So all cool things, guys. I do want to thank you all for tuning in. Appreciate you. And we'll do this again next week. We've got a repeat guest, Mr. Casey Reed. He just won a KBF event, and he's going to be on here next week to talk about it. So excited to start getting tournament anglers back on here, guys that are winning tournaments. Like we haven't had any tournaments for the last couple months. So cool to be able to have kind of that format back in action. And here before too long, we're going to have a Kansas kayak angler on here that's going to be talking about how he won the Big Hill event. So if you guys want to get involved in the Kansas kayak anglers, shoot me a message, go over to Facebook and find the Kansas Kayak Anglers page. We've also got the Kansas Bass Nation Kayak Series that we're going to be running in conjunction with a few of those events. We'll have a couple standalone events with some big payouts as well. So looking forward to making this big year for kayak bass fishing in the state of Kansas. And guys, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to call it a night. Appreciate you for tuning in. See you on the next one.